Om Yam Brahma Varunendra Rudramarudastunyanti Divyaistavaihi Vedai Sankapadakramopanisadaihi Gayanti Yam Samagaha Dhyanavasthita Tadgatena Manasa Pashyanti Yam Yogino Yasyantam Navidussura Suraganaha Devaya Tasmai Namaha Om Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavad Padam Shankaram Loka Shankaram. So we are continuing the discussion on the 16th sloka of the second chapter. Na sudo vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate sataka, upayoravi dustvanayohu tattvadarshitihi. So we have already discussed the early part of the Bhashyam. So Bhashyakara says, Vikarascha vibhijarati yatha ghadadi samsthanam chakshusha nirupyamanam mrtvitirekena anuvilabdhehi asat tatha sarvo vikaraha karana vitirekena anuvilabdhehi asan jadma prabdhumsa bhyam pragurdham cha anuvilabdhehi. So a pot has no existence before the pot maker makes the pot from clay, and after it is broken it goes back to its clay form. So the pot as such, existing as nama and rupa associated with the pot, is only for a moment. It is only vyavaharika satta. So its existence is only mithya existence. The Bhashyakara makes a very interesting statement in the Brahma Sutra in this connection. He says, a ghatakasha, the space that we consider to be limited by the shape of the pot, ghatakasha, and mahakasha are actually the same, only ghatakasha is nothing but mahakasha confined, limited by the pot, its shape. Yatha ghatakaraga dyakashanam mahakasha ananyatvam yatha cha mrigadushnigo udagadinam usharadibhyo ananyatvam drishta nashta surupatvad surupena anubhakhyatvad evam asya bhogya bhoktradi prapancha jadasya brahma vitirekena abhavaha. So, just as the pot has no existence independent of the existence of the clay or the earth from which the pot is made, similarly, this world of empirical experience has no ontological reality independent of the reality of Brahman. When you attribute name and form and causation, which are really only superimpositions on Brahman, we experience the world. When you become a Jivan Mukta, when you are able to perceive this world without its association with name and form, then you are perceiving only Brahman. Brahma Satyam, Jagat Satyam is the highest experience. So just as the pot ether, the basin ether, etc. are not different from the Akasha or space at large, the pot space, basin space, are not actually different from the space at large. And just as the mirage water, the water that we mistake to be existent in mirage, etc., are not actually different from the desert sand, etc. Similarly, they are of the same nature, the nature of that appear and are subsequently sublated, because the water experience is sublated when we come close to the mirage, then we see only the sand. And similarly, when the pot is removed, then the Ghatakasha, the pot space, the space that is confined and limited to the Ghata, actually merges with the Mahakasha, the space at large. Because they are of the nature of what appear, they are just appearance, and they are subsequently sublated when we get a true picture of what the mirage is, then the water disappears. But then we cannot say they are totally unreal, because the pot is experienced for the time being. When a pot maker makes the pot, or when a goldsmith makes a golden jewelry, it is experienced to be somewhat different from gold assets, or the pot is seen and perceived and experienced to be somewhat different from the earth from which the pot is made. But in the ultimate analysis, the existence of the pot, independent of clay, is sublated. So when you melt the golden jewelry, we suddenly realize that after all, these necklaces or rings, all these ornaments made from gold have really no existence independent of the gold from which they are made. So that their nature cannot be defined. Surupena anupakhyatvat, Bhashyam says the Brahma Sutra in the second pada. Even so, this world, this Jagat, this aggregate of names and forms consisting of different objects of enjoyment and enjoyers, bhogya bhoktradi prapancha jatasya brahma vidirekena abhavaha. So this world, which we consider to be real when we are in a state of ignorance, is seen to be unreal and having no existence independent of Brahman. This is a great statement in the Brahma Sutra Bhashya. So now the Bhashyakara continues his discussion. Now here the Purva-Bakshin raises an objection. So he asks this question: Murdadi karanasya tat karanasya cha tat karana vyatirekena anubalabdhehi asatvam tat asatvecha sarva abhava prasanga iti ched. So there is a great argument on the part of the objector, the Purva-Bakshin. The Purva-Bakshin is asking this question: if the totality of causes and effects, karya and karana, the pot is karya, murt is karana. So if you argue that this pot is unreal, if it is mithya, then the cause of that pot also should be mithya. And the cause of the pot, the karana of the pot is mrit, that should be mithya. And the karana of mrit also should be mithya. And the karana of that karana also should be mithya. So the cause of the pot is mrit, that is earth or clay. If that is mithya, then the cause of clay should be mithya, and the cause of that cause of clay also should be mithya. So that will lead to a serious problem in philosophy, sarva abhava prasanga iti ched. Then they will arise this problem, the contingency of an absolute vacuum. It will be something like Shunyavada Nagarjuna. So you have to admit that practically nothing is real, everything is unreal. So that is totally is out of question, and Advaitin cannot agree to these arguments. So what reply are you going to give? So in this context, one point that we already discussed in the last session, we have to clearly keep in mind that the word asatvam, when we use the word asat in the context of Jagat, it should be understood as mithya. And mithya is certainly not absolute non-existence. what is absolute non-existence or what is absolutely non-existent cannot even become part of a discussion or a debate. Aprasaktasya ka prastavaha aprasaktasya ko nishedha. Prasaktasya ka prastavaha prasaktasya ko nishedha. What is absolutely aprasakta, what is totally unreal, out of context, we don't discuss about it. What cannot be even intellectually conceived of, we don't discuss about such a thing, because it is obviously irrational. Like Bandhyaputra, it is totally irrational, incomprehensible, inconceivable. At the same time, what is obvious, also we cannot deny it. So, prasaktasya na nishedha and prasaktasya na prastavaha. What is obvious, we don't make a statement about it because it is so obvious and we don't deny it either. We cannot deny it. But then, what is this asatvam? What do you mean when what do we mean when we declare this world to be mithya? What we mean is, this world as we perceive, which is a totality of nama and rupa, names and forms, and also causation, is not absolutely real, but it is not absolutely unreal. So we already discussed the definitions of mithya in the last session. So Bhashyakara gives the reply. Na sarvatra buddhidvayo upalabdhehi sadbuddhi asadbuddhi iti. So Bhashyakara is making an important statement here. Yad vishaya buddhi na vyabhijarati tat sat, yad vishaya buddhi vyabhijarati tat asat iti. Sadasat vibhage buddhi tantre sthite. So the Bhashyakara says, in all cognitive experience, we have to deal with two types of cognitions, two types of perceptions. One, the cognition of the real and the cognition of what is obviously unreal. Now, that cognition is real, or that buddhi is real, whose cognition never changes. It is immutable. It is not mutable. And that which is unreal, whose cognition is changing. So what is subject to changes is not real in the absolute sense of the term. It could be relative, but it is not real. This world of names and forms is changing every day, just as body is changing every day. So Bhashyakara says that buddhi associated with a cognition which is subject to changes cannot be real in the absolute sense. So that buddhi which never changes, which remains without any change, is sat. A cognition which remains without any change, same throughout the past, present and future, is real. And a buddhi or a cognitive faculty associated with something which remains without a change in the past, present and future, prag and urdham, before something coming into existence and before it has ceased to exist. That buddhi is real. And that buddhi which is associated with something which is changing from past to present and from present to future, that buddhi cannot be real, it is asat. So the Bhashyakara says, in all our cognitive experience of human speculation, there are two cognitions. One, the cognition of the real and the cognition of the unreal. So how do we define the real cognition? The real cognition is that something which remains intact without any change in the past, present and future, that is real, and that which is mutable, which changes from time to time, from past to present and present to future, is asat, it is unreal. So, this is common in all types of cognitions. Yad vishaya buddhihi na vibhijarati tat sat. Yad vishaya buddhihi vibhijarati tat asat iti sadasat vibhage buddhitantre sthite sarvatra dve buddhi sarvaihi upalabhyeti samanadhikarane. So Bhashyakara says, throughout the whole human cognitive world, we have to deal with two types of cognitions, which means one cognition which doesn't change, when our consciousness of a thing remains intact without any change in the past, present and future, then it is called Sadbuddhi, it is real. On the other hand, that cognition which is subject to changes, when it deviates, it is Asadbuddhi, it is unreal. Thus, the distinction between Sadbuddhi, that is reality, and Asadbuddhi, unreality, depends on our own consciousness. Now, Bhashyakara says, in this case, when we analyze this Sadasat Buddhi in this particular context, we have to take the example of San Khadaha, San Pataha, San Hasti, and not the example of Nilotpalam. That's what Bhashyakara says. So, here is a very important statement is made. Sarvatrahi dve buddhi sarvaihi upalabhyeti samanadhikarane. So, the samanadhikarana, that example should be taken. In all our experiences, this twofold consciousness can be felt in relation to one and the same substratum. So, samanadhikarana is an important aspect of understanding this part of the Bhashya. So, samanadhikaranya is defined as a common reference of two words in an expression, each by itself applying to different objects. So, the classical definition of samanadhikaranya is Bhinna pravritti nimittanam sabdanam ekasmin arthe vrittihi samanadhikaranyam. That is, as a common reference of two words when they refer to the same thing in an expression, but each by itself could apply to two different objects, but in this particular expression, these two words have a common reference. So, they are referring to the same substratum. In such a context, there are two ways of understanding samanadhikarana. So, Bhashyakara says, na nilotpalavat san ghadaga san pataka san hasti iti evam sarvatra. It should not be understood as the expression like the blue lotus, Neelam Utpalam. Neelam is Visheshana, Utpalam is Visheshya. Neelam means that it is blue, an adjective. It demonstrates the quality of the lotus. So, this is not the way to understand this samanadhikaranya in this particular context. Rather, it should be understood as san khataka, san pataka. Bhashyakara will explain later that in a word like san khataka, that means the pot is, or the cloth is there, the pot is there. San hasti, the elephant is there. In these words, pot is a word, is an object that when associated with Sadbuddhi, implied by the word Sat, indicates the fact that there is a pot. But that pot may not remain there all the time. That pot may be broken. But the ease aspect, the Sadbuddhi, that is not going to change. That can be associated with something else. Sun pataka, cloth is there. Sun hasti, elephant is there. So the pot will change when it is broken, and the cloth will change when the cloth disappears. The hasti will change when the elephant walks away. But the sun aspect is sat aspect, sat buddhi, associated with sun ghadaka, sun padaka, sun hasti, remains all the time. It never changes. So it is sadbuddhi. So we have to understand in the context of the Bhashya. So Bhashyakara says, Tayoga buddhyoga ghadadi buddhi vivijaradi tathacha darshitam. So already demonstrated. So in this particular expression, Niravarnam and Utpalatvam. One is guna, the other is guni. So there are two buddhis, two levels of awareness. So the word Neelam is only qualifier, it is only an adjective which says something about the lotus, that it is blue in color. It doesn't give existence to lotus. It only says something about the lotus, that is, its color is blue. But in the context of sun padaka, the pot is there. The word sun gives existence to pot because it says there is a pot. So also sun padaka. Sun padaka means the cloth is there. Sun khataka, the pot is there. Sun padaka, the cloth is there. Sun hasti, the elephant is there. So the word sun gives existence, astitvam, to pot, that is ghataka, to padaka, the cloth, and hasti, the elephant. So that sun stands for sadbuddhi. Ghata is not sadbuddhi, ghata is asadbuddhi, because ghata could change. Instead of ghata, pada can come, cloth can come, elephant will come. So it is not dharma dharmi bhava. It should be understood very clearly. And it is not visheshana visheshi bhava either, as in the case of Nilotpalam. Rather, it is sadbuddhi and asadbuddhi. That means the basis of ghadabuddhi is sadbuddhi, sat. The basis of ghadabuddhi, the basis of sadbuddhi are different. The basis of ghadabuddhi changes vibhijarati, because after some time the ghada, the pot may not be there, but the sat will always be there. The sat can join some other objects and thereby imply its existence. So in this context, it should be taken as Aikya Samanadhikaranyam, like Tattwamasi, Soyam Devadatta, etc. We will discuss this subject later. So what the Bhashyakara says is this, that in this context we should take it as San Ghadaka, San Padaka, San Hasti ityevam sarvatra tayoga buddhyo gadadi buddhi vibijarati tataja darshidam nadu sadbuddhi tasmat gadadi buddhi vishayaha asat vibijarat nadu sadbuddhi vishayaha avibijarat. So Bhashyakara insists again and again, it should be taken as San Ghadaka, San Padaka, etc. Where the word sun gives existence to Ghataka, saying there is a pot, or sun gives existence to Padaka, there is a cloth, San Hasti, etc. So it is not that is Visheshana Purvada Karmadharya Samasa like Nilotpalam. So Bhashyakara says, Na Nilotpalavat. Now here the objector raises a serious objection. Ghade vinaste gadabuddhu vibijarantiyam sadbuddhi api vibijarati iti ched. Well, one pot one part we may lose, one part may be broken. So Ghada Buddhi naturally changes. So in that case, the Ghada Buddhi and Sat Buddhi have an inseparable connection. That's the Purvapakshin implies. The Purvapakshin says that the particular Sat Buddhi also changes. The Sat Buddhi associated with Ghada also changes. Just like Ghada Buddhi, which is Asat, changes, so also Sat Buddhi also changes. In that case, Sat Buddhi cannot be. Sat Buddhi should be Asat only. So that's an objection that the Purvapakshin is raising. Ghade vinaste Ghadabuddho vibhicharantyam Sat Buddhi api vibhicharati iti chet. So when the pot is destroyed and the buddhi or cognition of the pot also changes, then the cognition of the real Sat also changes. So Bhashyakara says no. His objection is the buddhi of the real is still available. That means the Sat Buddhi is always be there. Sat Buddhi cannot change. Na padado abhi Sat Buddhi darshanat. The Sat Buddhi associated with the Ghada Buddhi remains intact even when Ghada disappears, because this Sat Buddhi is part of the universal cosmic existence. So Sat Buddhi is nothing but the human cognitive dimension of the universal existence. So this Sat Buddhi, which was once associated with the Ghada Buddhi, when Ghada was sitting there, remains intact, and this Sat Buddhi can join with Pada. It could become, we can say, San Pataka or San Hasti, because Sat Buddhi never changes, never deviates. Visheshana Vishya eva sa Sat Buddhi. So that Sat Buddhi is only just it's only a Visheshana. It is only qualifies something which it states to be existent. When the Sat or Sun as an adjective joined with an object, then the existence of that object is clearly demonstrated. So Sat Buddhi never changes, never deviates. Na padado abhi Sat Buddhi darshanat visheshana vishaya eva sa Sat Buddhi. Even when the Ghada disappears, when the pot disappears, the Sat Buddhi that was once associated with Ghada remains intact. It doesn't perish when Ghada perishes. That Sat Buddhi remains intact, and it can be joined with many other things, because this Sat Buddhi, the human cognitive dimension of the universal existence of Sat. Sat Buddhivat Ghada Buddhi abhi Ghadandre drishyate iti chet. So, if one part is destroyed, then you said the Sat Buddhi associated with that Ghada remains intact. So Ghada disappears. This Ghada Buddhi changes, so Ghada Buddhi disappears. But that Ghada Buddhi can be seen again in its connection with another Ghada. So that is the objection. Na padado adarshanath. That is, this Sat Buddhi only qualifies, modifies, says something about Ghada. That Ghada Buddhi, which was associated with a Ghada, which perishes, cannot be identified with the Pada. The Padado Adarshanath, because that Sat Buddhi remains intact. So it remains along with all other objects, the Pada, Ghada, Hasti, everything. So Bhashyakara says, no, it is not available with regard to cloth. That means when Ghada Buddhi disappears, the Sat remains, but that Sat can be always associated with another object. So objection asked the question, the Purvapakshi asked the question, like the cognition of the real, the cognition of the pot also is available in regard to another existent pot. When one pot disappears, perishes, then the Sadbuddhi associated with the pot that is already gone can join with another pot. Now Bhashyakara says no. It is not available in regard to a pot. So then the objection, the cognition of the real too does not occur in regard to the pot that is already perished. He says, Sadbuddhi abhi nashte gadena drishyate iti ched. When ghata is gone, when the pot is gone, then the Sadbuddhi in that pot is also becomes invisible. It has gone. That is, when ghata is destroyed, the particular ghata buddhi in association with Sadbuddhi is gone, but at the same time the Sat, which is the Adhisthana, with the substratum or everything that exists, doesn't disappear, it remains the same, because that Sadbuddhi is the cognitive dimension of the absolute reality. Now Bhashyakara's reply, na visheshya bhavat, because when ghata disappears, the visheshya, which is ghata, is no more there. So in that case, the Sadbuddhi associated with that particular ghata which perishes is no more there. But Sat remains there. That Sat can always associate with many other entities which are already existing, because it never changes, it never disappears. Na vishesha bhava, visheshya bhava, Sadbuddhi visheshana vishayas sati, visheshya bhave, visheshena anubhavattu kim vishayasya, na tu punat Sadbuddhi ke vishaya bhavat. We cannot say that, because that Sadbuddhi may not exist in connection with the Visheshya, but the Sadbuddhi, which is the Sat, which is the existent dimension of everything in this world, in this in the universe, which exists, that Sadbuddhi always remains there. It always can associate itself with everything in this world which has got an existence. It is the Sadbuddhi that gives existence to everything that is existing. Okay? Om yam brahma varunendra rudramarudastunyanti divyaistavaihi vedai sangapada kramopanishadaihi gayanti yam samagaha dhyanavasthita tadgatena manasa pashyandi yam yogino yasyantam na vidussura suraganaha devaya tasmai namaha. Om Sruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavad Padam Shankaram Loka Shankaram. So in the last session we were discussing one important Purvapaksha, Sadbuddhiriti Nashte Ghate Nadrishyade iti ched. So the Purvapakshi is asking the question, when a pot, ghata, is lost, when it disappears, then the Sadbuddhi associated with that ghata also disappears. So Sadbuddhi cannot be considered to be eternal. It also changes. So that's a Purvapaksha, an objector's view, which is elaborately refuted by the Bhashyakara, Na visheshya bhava sadbuddhihi visheshna vishaya sati visheshya bhave vishesha anubhavatto kim vishaya syat nadu punah sadbuddhihi vishaya bhavat. That is, the sadbuddhi never changes, it never disappears. The sadbuddhi associated with ghata, with the pot, which gave existence to ghata, that sadbuddhi as a visheshana no longer exists, but sadbuddhi as it continues to exist. It never changes, it never disappears, because that sadbuddhi is our cognitive dimension, as we mentioned already, of the universal existence. It is sadbuddhi that gives existence to everything in this world, and it never changes, it remains intact. Even after the ghata, the pot disappears, this sadbuddhi can join with pada, the cloth, or hasti, the elephant. It is this sadbuddhi, this easeness or ease, this unchanging reality that gives existence, that implies the existence of everything that exists in the world. It's already explained. In this context, the Purvapakshi raises another objection. Egadhigaranatvam ghadadi visheshya bhave na yuktam iti ched. That is, Egadhigaranatvam, that is, the same adhigarana, two cognitive aspects, two cognitions referring to the same adhigarana. So, when in the absence of visheshya like ghata, then how can we say there is egadhigaranatvam? So the twofold consciousness, egadhigaranatvam, centering or focusing on one and the same substratum, it is not logical, it cannot be explained in the absence of visheshya ghata, because the ghata, which is visheshya, the substantive, is no more there. So there cannot be egadhigaranatvam. So Bhashyakara replies, na idam udagam iti marichyadi anyatara bhave api samanadhigaranya darshanat. So samanadhigaranyam still continues, because we may look at a mirage and we may wrongly assume there is water. So in the same substratum, adhigarana, mirage, we assume there is water without water. There is no water, really speaking, but we realize this, we recognize the mirage to be mirage only when we approach the mirage, when we come very close to it. So when we see a mirage under the burning sun in a seashore, we may mistake the vast expanse of sand to be a pool of water, a lake sometimes. And there is no real water. But still, though there is no water and there is only mirage, still we may assume idam utakam. We may mistake this sand to be a pool of water without there being any water. So, even in the absence of water, we may assume there is water. Therefore, even in a mirage, we will have this experience, samanadhigaranyam, though there is no water. That is, in the one and the same substratum, that is in the mirage, marichiga, we will have this asadbuddhi, water, as well as the consciousness or the sadbuddhi, idam udagam. So, we may assume there is water, so we use these two words, two cognitive aspects. One is idam and udakam. With reference to mirage, though there is no water, it is asad-buddhi, but still sad-buddhi is there. We recognize that it is only mirage when we approach to it. So this objection is now refuted, because though there is no water really speaking other than the mirage, still we may assume and make a declarational statement, idam udagam. So asad-buddhi and sad-buddhi are possible even in a substratum. So that's a reply. Tasma deha dehe dvandasya cha sakaranasya asado na vidyate bhava iti. Therefore, this body, though we are experiencing, as well as these pairs of opposites, dvandas, sukham, dukkham, sitam, ushnam, all these, though they are unreal, they have no existence, even though we may assume due to ignorance that they are real. So just because our senses give the wrong impression and we feel that this Sita, Ushna are real, still that's not a guarantee, that is not a proof that it is real. In Vedanta, whatever we perceive with the senses and mind is itself a proof that it is not absolutely real, because the absolute reality can never be perceived with the senses and mind. So whatever we perceive with the mind and senses cannot be absolutely real. The absolute reality is beyond sensory cognition or intellectual perception. It is not paroksha, it is not remote, but it is not pratyaksha in the sense that it could be perceived through the senses. It could neither be perceived by the senses, nor is it remote. It is neither pratyaksha nor paroksha. It is aparoksha. It's sakshat aparokshat brahma, as the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad makes it clear. So this particular objection is clearly answered. That means whatever is empirical, whatever belongs to sensory perception, belongs to the realm of changing realities, and changing realities are not absolute reality, not absolutely real. Changing realities come and go. They are not absolutely unreal, but they are not absolutely real either. So according to Vedanta, as we mentioned earlier, Trishu Kaleshu Yet Na Vibhijarati, Trishubi Kaleshu Na Vibhijarati, Tadeva Satyam. Satyam, or the absolute reality, is that which remains without any change in the triple dimensions of time, the past, present and future. It should be Trikala Atita, it should be Sadvikara Atita. So Bhashyakara makes an important statement. Tatha satascha atmanaka abhavaha avidyamanata na vidyate sarvatra abhibijarat iti avochama. Therefore, as we have already stated, this Atman, which is Sat, which is what really gives existence to all existing things, as cannot have non-existence. Na sado vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate sataka. So, what the absolute reality cannot have a state of being non-existent, because it remains without any change under all conditions. So, in the Mandukya Karika, Gaudapada says, Ado ante chayan nasti vartamane pi tattatha vidathai sadrishas santu avidatha iva lekshita. So, whatever doesn't exist in the past and will not exist in the future, but appears to exist in the present, is also non-existent. So whatever did not exist in the past, that is before it came into existence, and whatever will not exist in future also does not exist in the present, though we may mistake it to be existing, but it really doesn't exist. So the mud pot, the clay pot, while existing as a pot, has no real existence as a pot independent of clay, mud or earth. Because before the pot maker made the pot, it did not exist. After the pot maker has broken it, after it has gone back this clay state, it cannot exist in future. Therefore, in the present also, when this clay pot is sitting in front of us, it has really no existence independent of clay or earth. So, whatever we experience in the present, whatever we perceive the mind and the senses, really cannot have ultimate absolute existence. Evam atma anatmanoho sadasatoho ubayoho api drishtaha ubalabdhaga anto nirnayaha sadeva asat eva iditu anayoho yudhoktayoho tattudarshibhi. Therefore, those who have perceived or realized the truth, those who have realized that this Atman is the reality, the absolute reality, which is immanent and which is also transcendent and also omnipresent. This Atman is our true nature. Those who realized this and those who realized Asat as Asat and Sat as Sat, they have clearly understood that the absolute reality cannot undergo any change or any deviation. So in this context we have some very interesting explanations by Madhusudana Saraswati, who wrote a wonderful commentary in Sanskrit on Bhagavad Gita based on Shankaracharya's Bhashyam. It is called Gudhartha Deepika. So Madhusudana says, Yat kalato deshado vastuno va parichinnam tat asat. That is, anything which is limited by time cannot be real in the absolute sense. It is called asat. Asat here means mithya. Yatha ghadadi janma vinasha shilam prakalena parakalena cha parichidyadi dhumsa pragbhava pradyogitvat kadajit kala parichinnam iti uchyate. So Madhusudana says, Yat kalato deshado vastunova parichinnam. In any objects or whatever we experience is unreal because it could be transient, because it could be limited by time, by space, or maybe by causation. So anything which is parichinnam, that kalato, limited by time, deshado, limited by space, it is transient. It may be existing here, it may not be existing elsewhere. So it is parichinnam or limited by space. It may exist now, it did not exist yesterday, and it will not exist tomorrow. So it is parichinnam kalataha. So kalado parichinnam, deshado parichinnam. Anything which is limited by time or by past, present and future, or anything which is limited by space, it is always transient, it is unreal, it is changing, it is not experienced the same way all the time. So then the great commentator Madhusudana says, Yatha, he gives an example, an illustration, Ghadadi Janma Vinasha Sheelam Prakalena Paragalena Cha Prakalena Paragalena Cha Parichiddhati. This tells you Ghadadi. For example, mud pot, clay pot. It's by its very nature comes into existence. And because it comes into existence, it is bound to disappear sometime in future. So, prakalena parakalena cha parichidyate. It is limited by time because it did not exist before it was made by the pot maker. And it will not exist after it is broken into pieces and after it disappears from that pot form and becomes one with clay. Dhvamsa pragabhava pratyogitvad. So, it could be called as pratyogi or counter correlate of its pre-existent and post-existent negation. So, it is negated in the past because it did not exist before the pot maker made the pot from clay, and it will not exist after it is broken. So, it is pratyogi, is a correlate of pre-existent and post-existent negation. It is negated in the past and it will be negated in future. So it cannot be eternal. It belongs to the changing realm of realities. Those things which are subject to changes and therefore unreal. So similarly, this body of ours, this world and all that we experiences belong to this realm of changing realities. So changing realities from a highest paramarthika perspective are the same as unreal, because anything to be called anything to be called real, anything to be called satyam or sat should exist without any change in the past, in the present and in the future. So that's why the Bhashyakara makes a very famous statement, Tasma deha dehi dundasya cha sakaranasya asadu na vidyate bhavayiti. And also, tatha satascha atmanaha abhavaha avidyamanada na vidyate sarvatra abhibijarat iti avochama. So very often, most of human problems arise by attributing permanence to things which are by their very nature impermanent. So we cannot expect this imperfect world to be perfect. But those who are spiritually evolved and those who have got a philosophical wisdom are able to understand that this world of empirical experiences by their very nature are unreal in the sense that they are subject to changes. Therefore they cannot be imperfect. But very often, due to ignorance or due to confusion or maybe due to lack of proper training according to Sampradaya, people may wrongly attribute perfection and permanence to things which are by the very nature imperfect and impermanent. So that's an important point that Madhusudana makes here. Tat idi sarvanama. Now we are dealing with that, the last part of this famous mantra, the 16th mantra. That is Dustvanayoho tattvadarshibhihi. So that is mentioned here. Tat idi sarvanama. Tattvadarshibhihi. Who is tattvadarshi? It's mentioned here. Tattvadarshi is a person who realizes this truth. He is a person who understands the unreality of empirical experiences and the reality of the absolute reality, Brahman or Atman, because it is unchanging. Even in this context, Madhusudana has something very important to say. Again he is referring to the previous section. Etadrishasya asataka sidoshnadehe Krishnasya api prapanchasya bhavaka satta paramarthigatvam sanyunavattagata adrisha paricheda shunyatvam na vidyate na sambhavati. So this prapancha, which experiences both heat and cold, pleasure and pain, good and bad, all these dvandvas, they will always remain impermanent and changing experiences. So, parichedya shunyatvam na vidyate. This world of empirical experiences will never be free from these limitations, because by their very nature they are limited, they are impermanent and they are imperfect, because they are subject to changes. This body and whatever we experience through the senses, through mind and through intellect, they are subject to changes by kalatova, vastunova, deshatova, parichinnattu, the Madhusudana I already stated. Now it gives a wonderful example. Ghadattu agadattu yoku iva parichinnattu aparichinnattu yoku ekatra virodha. So, when there is a pot cannot become something other than the pot. Similarly, the world of empirical experiences, the changing experiences cannot be perfect. This that pot cannot become a non-pot or something other than the pot. So ghada cannot become aghada. Pot and non-pot cannot exist simultaneously at the same time in a pot. It's a famous example. Ghadattu agadattu yoko iva parichinnattu aparichinnattu yoko ekatra virodhat. Limitation and a state of being unlimited cannot exist together, cannot coexist on the same object. Similarly, what is asat? That is vibhichari, subject to changes, imperfect, phenomenal experiences which are always in a flux. That asat cannot become sat. So asat, the changing phenomenal experiences which are imperfect, which are always in a flux, that asat can never become sat. Just as ghada cannot become aghada. Similarly, sat cannot become asat. The absolute reality, the Brahman or Atman, can never have any limitation. So the real remains the same reality. The real, the absolute reality remains the same without any dvandva, without any limitation, without any changes. Sadbuddhi remains without any change. If one ghada is destroyed, this sadbuddhi that gave existence to that particular ghada can associate itself with another ghada or other objects. That sadbuddhi remains without any change. So this sat can never become asat. The absolute reality, the Atman, can never become the non-absolute, the changing things. This idea behind. Tad idi sarvanama. Sarvam cha brahma tasya nama tad idi tad bhavaka. Tattum brahmano yadhatmyam tad drashtum shilam yesham te tattudashibhihi taihi tattudashibhihi. So Bhashyakara says Tat is sarvanama, and sarvam implies Brahman. Yato va imani bhudani jayante yena jatani jivanti yet prayanta visamvisanti tad vijiknyasasva tad Brahma. So that Brahman, it is sarvam, it is the point of origination, the source of origination of the whole creation. It is that Brahman that gives sustenance and existence to everything that exists. And this Brahman also is the point of dissolution of everything when things go back to their original nature. So, yato va imani bhutani jayante yena jatani jivanti yat prayanta abhisamvisanti jidma yasya. So, all these ideas are put together in this particular context. So, the Sadbuddhi, the easiness, that attributes existence to every existing thing remains the same without any change. That Sat can never become Asat. Bhashyam continues, Tumapi. Here, these words are addressed to Arjuna directly. Tumapi tattvadarsinam drishtim asritya shokam moham cha hitva sidoshnadini niyata aniyata rupani dundvani vikaraka ayam asan eva marichi jalavat mithya avabhasade iti manasi nischitya tidikshaswa iti abhipraya. So, the Bhashya continues. Lord Krishna tells Arjuna, Arjuna, you also try to attain this vision of the great Tattvadarshins, the great seers of the absolute reality, the truth, who are free from dundvas, who are free from pain and pleasure, joy and grief, who could look upon everything with a sense of perfect equanimity, who have realized the true nature of Atman, which is Sarvikara Advaita, which is beyond, which transcends existence, in the sense coming in the form of birth. Jayade, Asti, Vardhade, Vibrinamadi, Abhakshyade, Vinashyati. These are 6 changes. These great philosophers, these great wise seers of ancient times, they have realized that their true nature is the Atman, which is Sarvikara Advaita, which is beyond transition in the form of birth, that is a state of transition from a state of non-existence to empirical existence, which we call Janma, then existing for some time, then growing, evolving, decaying, and disappearing or dying. So, birth, existence, growth, evolution, decay and death. These 6 changes, which apply only to empirical experiences, which apply only to asat, ghata, pada, etc. Our true nature is something beyond that. Our true nature is that we are Atman, which is beyond these 6 changes. It's never born because it always exists. It never grows or evolves because it never changes. It never undergoes any change. It never decays because it doesn't have any change. And it never dies because it is eternal, immortal. So this is Vikara Advaita, Trikara Advaita. It remains same, the past, present and future. Avasthatraya Advaita. It is experienced without any change, as the same thing, same drashta or seer, the experiencer in the Jagra, Swapna, Sushupti states, that is waking, dream and dream state experiences, which is Trishu Kaleshu Nabhibijardi Tat Satyam. That they have realized. When they realized it, they transcend the empirical level, they transcend the dundas of pain and pleasure. Tumabi tattvadarsinam drishtimasritya. You also try to attain this higher spiritual vision. Shoka moham chakitva. Give up this grief and delusion. Sidoshnadini niyada aniyada rupani dundvani. You also give up, try to overcome these pairs of opposites like Sita Ushna, cold and heat. Because you should know they come and go. Agama payino anityaha niyada aniyada rupani. Sukham may be anugula vedaniyam, dukkha may be pratigula vedaniyam. So, didvantas which are agama payino anityaha niyada aniyada rupani, They are equally subject to changes. Pleasant experiences, sukha may be anukula vedaniyam. They may give you some enjoyment or pleasure for a moment, but that pleasure disappears and grief returns. Dukkha may be pratikula vedaniyam. So, the niyata aniyata rupani dundani, they may be pleasant, they may be unpleasant. They may be in the form of happiness or maybe in the form of unhappiness. Still, they are subject to changes. They come and they disappear, they go away. Vikaraka is only change, and because it is changing, it cannot be real. Ayam asan eva marichi jalavat mithya avabhasade iti manasi nischitya. Just as you mistake sand in a seashore, seen at a distance to be a pool of water, but later you correct yourself when you come close to it and you recognize the fact that it's only sand, not water. Similarly, when you see these experiences, whether anukula vedaniyam, which may be sukha experiences, or pratikula vedaniyam, which may be dukkha experiences, both grief and pleasure, you look upon them as mithya, impermanent, changing phenomenal experiences, just like marichi jalavat, or bhasati manasi nischitya tidikshasva iti abhiprayaka. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sri Rama Krishna Pranamastu.